SaaS CMO Pro.
Hey guys, Bill Macaitis here. Today I'm going to be talking about the number one reason that I see directors of marketing fail. Pretty, important topic. It's a lot of people's livelihoods on the line. So, I've been through and seen a lot over my years, my experience, previous SVP of Marketing of Salesforce, CMO of Zendesk, and CMO CRO of Slack. And I've worked with some amazing people, and I've seen a lot of people that make that leap into director of marketing. And by the way, it's not just director of marketing, right? This could be director of product marketing, director of events, director of, pricing and packaging, director of content marketing, fill in the blank, whatever kind of director level role that you see. And I think the first thing to realize is like, hey, if you are in marketing and you're watching this video, hey, you chose marketing. Awesome. Really fun topic, great area. It's something that you probably studied or maybe worked on. You've put your heart and soul into this area. And, the good news is like, hey, you chose a really fun area. The bad news is you chose an area that everyone else in the company also thinks they are an expert in. And that's tricky, right? Because, we do not go to a developer and go, hey, I know C++, I know all the language and architecture, and I'm going to build a language learning model for you. It's just something like, hey, we don't know that, right? So we rarely do that. But, the rest of the company, whether you're talking the C-suite, whether you're talking, sales, development, finance, HR, marketing tends to be one of those areas that a lot of people are like, oh, I watch commercials, I buy stuff, I'm kind of a marketing expert, right? And people tend to have really strong opinions on it. And I think that drives a lot of dynamics between marketers and specifically like these director level roles succeeding or failing. And really a lot of times what happens too in my experience is that, when someone makes director or even maybe like, manager, senior manager, where they start like managing a large group of people underneath them, a lot of times they're coming, they got promoted because they were really great at what they did. They were awesome at events. They were awesome at content marketing. They were awesome at marketing ops, fill in the blank on your marketing field of expertise. And they get promoted. And that's great. But a lot of times what happens too is, they come from an IC world, individual contributor, where they are focused on doing what they do and they do it awesome. And that's great, right? And when you make that leap to director, your time spent needs to kind of evolve, right? And where you put those calories and where you put that time. Number one, you have a team to manage now, right? And that's a whole separate area to talk about, right? On like how to inspire these people and lead them and set priorities and give feedback. That's a big time suck. But the other one is how to manage all these other stakeholders that have very strong opinions on exactly what you're doing. And that's where I see the biggest mistake is that people don't spend calories, they don't spend time, they don't spend the right percentage on managing those stakeholders and setting out the communications, the perception. And really what they do is they focus on doing kind of IC work. Hey, I got great at, knowing programmatic ads and I'm going to spend all my time, even though I'm director, I'm just doing that, right? I'm doing kind of the IC work and not spending the time on the communications and managing those stakeholders. And what ends up happening is that even though you are maybe killing it, maybe you're amazing, at what you're doing, and beyond those previous roles I had, Slack, Zendesk, Salesforce, I've been doing startups my entire life, right? And, for the last 4 years, I've been doing advisor and bold roles for other companies. So I see all these different companies, right? And how they perceive marketing and how they perceive the leaders with them. Unfortunately, I've seen roles where people were killing it in their function, right? Like if you just looked at that individual function, they were doing incredible. But the perception around the company was very negative towards that leader, very negative towards that function. And a lot of that comes just because they're not going out and, first off, identifying who are all the stakeholders that they need to, understand what their perception of marketing is, creating the comms and the materials to manage that and just keeping a pulse on it, right? Spending the right amount of time. So, my general recommendations are number one, like, hey, identify those stakeholders. So let's talk about that, right? Who are the stakeholders? You're a director of product marketing, right? Really important role within the company. And you have a lot of natural internal customers, right? If you're in product marketing, and again, I'm primarily talking about SaaS B2B software here, but this can be, wider applied, you're going to have stakeholders like sales, right? Outbound sales, and they're going to be, looking to you for, pricing and packaging. They're going to be looking to you for, collateral and, competitive, a bunch of areas. You're going to have stakeholders for product, right? Who are going to need your help with launches, and they're going to need your help with product roadmap, and you're going to be a very close partner there. But outside of that, though, you're going to have other teams within the organization that, again, are going to think they kind of know how to do your job. Lack of a better reason, right? So you're going to have finance that spends a lot of money on marketing, spends a lot of money maybe on product marketing and all your launches. They spend a lot of money on the headcount within product marketing. Maybe you have a 5-person team. That's a lot. You're going to have HR, which is going to have an opinion on marketing, believe it or not. You're going to have, the CEO that's going to have an opinion on marketing. You're going to have, the sales, the product, the finance, the HR. You're just going to have a lot of different teams that are going to have these perceptions of how, your function, your team is doing. So the first I say is like, hey, identify those stakeholders. Now, you don't have to go to the top for every single one of those organizations, but I think it's good to understand that, hey, these organizations are going to have an opinion. And then, start to develop a stakeholder within each one of those organizations. Maybe that like who's your counterpart? Who's the director of finance? Who's the director of sales? Who's the director of HR, right? Get to know them. Right? Like maybe go out to lunch with them, or if, it's virtual, set up some meetings, right? Get to know those stakeholders, right? So the next step is like, okay, well, now you know these stakeholders. How do you manage that, right? What are the communications you send out? So there's a lot of different communications you can think about, right? This could be something from, hey, here's a weekly status update of everything we're doing in product marketing. Right? Here's the top 10 initiatives. Maybe it's an Ant chart. Maybe it's just a, green, yellow, red, the momentum. Here's what we did. That's great. Put that together. Send it out, right? Send it out normally, whether that's an email, whether that's a Slack, whether that's in person, right? Send out some daily cadence about what your team is up to, right? Because a lot of times, I hate to say it, but a lot of times your teams, they don't even know what you do, right? I mean, they're kind of like, all right, they do product marketing, but what are they doing? God, they're just, goofing off all day, or they're not doing anything. Like, I don't understand, right? And I think, again, if you put your empathy cap on, and if we were like, what does that team of developers do all day, you might I don't know, right? Like, I'm marketing, I don't know what they do. But a lot of people are like, what does marketing do? And sometimes the perceptions, maybe they've had bad experiences with marketing teams in the past, right? Like maybe they have burned through, millions of dollars and couldn't show any impact for it, right? So I think it's really good to send out a regular cadence of updates, to all these different teams, to all these different stakeholders, to kind of let them know, hey, what's going on in your world. The second is, I think it's good to go to these stakeholders and, again, try to have some one-on-one meetings with your counterparts and ask them, like, hey, how do you think marketing's doing? How do you think product marketing is doing? What do you think we could be doing better? Where do you think we're doing good? Right? And it doesn't have to be like in a very, you do it in a non-threatening way, and just try to understand, right? Hey, what's going on? Where are we weak? Where are we strong? At least you're going to understand that. I remember I had a board meeting, and I was CMO, you're kind of doing the same thing, but with different stakeholders. But we had a board member that I had a conversation with before the board meeting, and, he kind of alluded like, hey, I'd really like to see more customer stories, right? That was kind of his thing, like, what are you doing, marketing? You should have more of these. And the good news is, we actually had been working on 10 of them, but he didn't know that, right? So I made a point to make sure, actually, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's the roadmap. Here are the individual companies that we've been interviewing. And here's the collateral and the assets. But it's kind of good to know. It's you want to know the landmines, right? You want to know some stakeholders maybe have a very negative view of your team because of X, whatever that is, right? Now, that might be right or that might be wrong, but it's important to kind of know where those landmines are, right? And also just get the vibe. Are they like, oh yeah, you guys are killing it, right? Like, I love you guys, right? Or like, I don't know, this person has this negative really experience with, or this shipped late, or, whatever it is, just understand it, right? So, let's go back. Identify the stakeholders, think about your communications, right? That could be in person. That could be an ongoing set of weekly, hey, here's what's going on in our team. The communications are really important. Next, I would really say, think about the percentage of time that you're spending towards this. Literally counts it out, right? Hey, however long your day is, how many hours, minutes, cycles are you going to put towards, I call it comms, right? Communications to all these different stakeholders. And this kind of gets back to the original intent, why do a lot of these directors fail? It's because they put 100% on IC, on just doing the function of their job, and their heads are down and they're doing it. But all the time, like, you have these swirling, rumors, what people's perceptions are on that team, and they're not managing that. They're not thinking about, like, hey, how do I identify who these people are and how do I manage that perception? So I generally recommend, if you're a director, you should be spending 30% of your time on this. So if you're on an 8-hour day or 10-hour day, that's 3 hours roughly, right, of your time. That's a lot, right? But there's a lot of different stakeholders that you need to manage, you need to understand. And again, you're kind of representing your team, right? This isn't just you as an individual anymore. You're a director of a team. You have a 2-person team or an 8-person team or a 10-person team, whatever it is. You really need to let the organization know what is your team up to? How are they performing? What are the key milestones? What are the metrics they're doing? Now, these communications, again, they can have just not only what you're up to, but hey, put metrics against that, right? I'm a big believer, no matter what function you are in marketing, you should be able to have some metrics to guide against. That could be anything from hey, a date, we need to launch this by April 3rd, and here's how we're progressing towards that. It could be, if you're in demand gen, you could have an ROI or a CAC payback metric. You could have, for product marketing, actually internal stakeholder surveys. So you're emailing your internal stakeholder surveys and you're asking sales, hey, how do we think product marketing, how much value are we providing? How responsive are we? You can have metrics that you manage to get, but put that out in the communications too. That's really important. And the last thing I'd say too is think about how you can continue to educate these stakeholders. So again, a lot of people outside the organization, within the organization, outside the marketing organization, have a view of marketing, and they, have a view of what the ad should say, what the copy should be, what our value proposition should be, what our pricing should be, right? Again, because these are as individuals and as consumers, we go through a lot of this stuff in our own daily life, right? So you really have to think about how you can educate folks too, though, right? So maybe, again, earlier we're talking about, hey, you're talking to a stakeholder and they're like, I really, that last launch you guys did, it just took forever. It felt like, why did it take so long? Or, hey, the messaging, it feels like our messaging is really dated. Why don't you just change it? Just go on, website, change. It's changed. Why does that take one day? I remember, when I was at Salesforce, Mark sometimes would get really frustrated with this, right? Hey, you don't understand, our messaging changed. Why can't we just on the website? And I knew, because I've been doing this a long time, that is, when you change your messaging, that is a really, really large scale effort, right? You're talking about every single place that your message is on, your website, all your sales collateral, your content, your event materials. You're touching so many different assets and collateral. And not only that, but you have to go through the exercise of changing the message. What should the message be? Identifying, personas and strengths and weaknesses and competitive. And it is not trivial. One does not simply walk into Mordor. So you have to really think about these things and start educating your stakeholders too, right? How long does something like that take? Oh, you think we should do message? Okay, well, hey, let me just walk you through what that looks like, right? Here, and they're oh, okay. They start to understand a little bit, right? And by the way, it's the same. As marketers, we do this too, right? We are hey, I want to build this page, this landing page, and I hand it off to my, developers. Why does that take a month, right? And same thing. They're well, actually, we have to do this, and we have to change our backend architecture and blah, blah, blah. And there's reasons. A lot of times those reasons are very legitimate. So education of your stakeholders is a really big part of it as well, right? So, to kind of wrap up, why do I see a lot of directors fail is, number one, they don't know who their stakeholders are. They haven't mapped that out within the organization. Who are the key people on all these different teams? They haven't gone and just talked to them, right? Do they really know these stakeholders? I always told my directors, hey, you should be able to know, if they have kids and what maybe one of their kids' names are. What is the name of their spouse or partner, or someone that's really important to them? That just means you've gone beyond just a super superficial relationship to hey, you actually know these people, right? So, stakeholders, you know them. Do you have a set of communications that you send out that regular update people? Hey, maybe there's an all hands going on. I've done a lot of all hands, right? We're always looking for people for content, right? We're we got to fill an hour up. Who are we going to do this? Oh, and maybe this person, oh yeah, I'll talk about what's going on my team. Great. Here's 10 minutes, right? You get to talk to, now you get to talk to a lot of stakeholders at once, big bang for the buck. That's great. Talk about the metrics, talk about, what's going through. And then the last area, educate too. Maybe there's a perception that your team isn't doing this. Well, let's educate them what we're on, but also educate how long things take, right? And you're not going to change people's minds in, one interaction. For anyone that's in B2B marketing, same thing, especially if you're selling the enterprise, these are not someone doesn't hear about you once and buy you tomorrow. These are long deal cycles, right? These are 3, 6, 6, 9 month, 1 year, sometimes 2-year deal cycles. It's the same with all your internal stakeholders. If you have someone that has a very negative perception or on a certain point, like that's going to require a campaign. It's almost like it's its own marketing campaign, right? To these stakeholders to start to educate them, drip marketing and different forms of comms and educating about what marketing does and how long it takes and the impact you're making. It's really important. Now, look, if you're outside marketing, I think sometimes maybe you don't have to do this. Maybe you can get away with it, right? Maybe you can get away with just heads down. I'm never going to talk to another person outside my team, and I'm just going to do great. And hopefully my boss knows that. I still say that's like a very risky strategy. But there are some areas where I think people have less of an opinion on how that team should be doing because they're just, they're outside their domain expertise. You are in marketing. You are in marketing. So that just means everyone's going to have opinions, and you can either acknowledge that and go, hey, that's okay. And I'm going to identify these people. I'm going to think about my comms, think about my metrics, think about how I educate them. Just from a pure success standpoint, the people I've seen that do that at the director level do really well, right?
Yes.
Now, of course, you still have to make sure your function, your team, and management. And there's a whole other area there that you're making progress and you're moving forward. But the people that handle that comms portion do really well. They start to move up, right, to the senior director and VP and CMO and beyond. The people that just go heads down, completely ignore the comms, really just open themselves up to risk, right? Because as we all know, marketing is hard, but also in SaaS in general right now, what we're seeing is companies have to be very capital efficient, right? The markets have dynamically changed, with interest rates higher, future discounted cash flows, SaaS valuations are much lower. SaaS companies now have to think about being profitable. They're really squeezing every dollar. And a lot of times they're looking at marketing, right? They're looking at marketing. Was marketing really making an impact? Is product marketing making an impact? Is our demand gen team really making an impact? Is our events team really making an impact? And the people that have spent comms and kind of outline, hey, this is what our value is, this is what we do. They're seeing the metrics, they're seeing them them go up to the right. You're seeing them make an impact that you can measure. Those teams are in really good shape. The teams that, the directors that just are heads down, again, have never built those relationships, aren't sending out any comms to any, internal stakeholders. That's hard, right? Sometimes, boards, CFOs, CEOs, they have to make tough decisions, right? On, hey, we got to be more efficient. We need to cut people or we need to cut budget. And the teams that, again, have not managed those comms sometimes find themselves in a really precarious position, right? So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Put in the comments why you think that directors of marketing and their various subsets fail. But looking forward to talking with you guys and talking about a lot more topics coming soon. Thanks so much.